now we're going to kick off the main event. I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Aurora Nation, which I am standing on today, past, present, and emerging, and just pay my respects to those people if we can. Now, Sylvia, I've known you for several years now. You were introduced me by a dear friend of mine, Fiona Campbell, and she told me, Gavin, you have to meet this lady. She is going and taking on the world when it comes to Montessori in early childhood. She's got all these thousands of people all over the world listening and talking in this community. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey into Montessori and what is Guide and Grow.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gavin. Yeah, I was really pleased to have met you and to have that connection with you as well. Let me tell you a little bit about my Montessori journey. It was a little bit interesting. So I actually started my career in hospitality and in personal training and fitness. So that was something completely different. And then I had a major event in my life, a car accident actually, that put me on this Montessori journey. So I actually had to stop and reassess my life. And I think it's pivotal moments like these that happen in our lives that really make us reflect and think about, what are the characteristics that we have and what is it that we really want to do to fulfill that purpose in life. So I had a dear friend of mine. She was actually teaching Montessori in Vienna. And so she took me under her wing, and that's how I got introduced to it. And as soon as I read up on Montessori, like we all do, we have this light bulb moment and we say, oh my God, this is exactly what I need to be doing in my life. And from that moment on, it was just my passion. And that's exactly what I knew that I wanted to do. So I started a Montessori preschool here in Sydney, Australia, because I know that we have people listening from all around the world. And then through that preschool, I actually started Guide and Grow. So Guide and Grow, as you mentioned, it's a global platform. So we have members, we've got over 200,000 members globally that are interested in practicing Montessori at home. We do specialize in the 0 to 6 age bracket. So we provide resources, videos, all free on our platforms, on our website. And we basically support caregivers. That includes early childhood educators, parents, caregivers, to really help them implement the Montessori approach, whether that be in the home or in the classroom. And we have a specialty in how to communicate and guide children's behavior. So that's something that I love speaking about. We keynote and speak all over the globe and travel to conferences. So Guide and Grow is really just a supportive platform for all those that are looking for additional resources. And last year we actually we launched our first Guide and Grow Village app. So now people can access a lot of our materials and resources, month by month guides, everything through an app, and connect with exactly what Upschool's doing, but in the early childhood space. So they can connect with other like-minded parents, caregivers, educators, to really have that support 24/7 from their phone or the convenience of their laptop. So that's basically my little background story of how I came to Montessori.
Amazing. So basically, you're running a preschool in Sydney, at the same time running a global education network with collaborating and learning from each other and advising families and parents and teachers and schools.
Yeah.
And you're doing it all at once. Is there a big team behind you?
Yes. So I am so blessed to have an amazing team of people. We have some that are local here in Australia, and then we've got a global team. So altogether, I think we've got around 20 in our team. That includes our Facebook moderators or marketing team. And I've definitely got a lot of support to make this all happen, because I remember back at the beginning stages, it was just go, go, go and doing everything yourself. So I feel like the biggest success for any business is to have the right people, and the people who are really passionate about what you're doing. So not only have the experience or the expertise, but they actually are really passionate about our whole motto or our whole vision, which is raising tomorrow's children. So I think that's key to any whether it be a business or an organization or a school. It's just the passion or the same vision that people have that really drive everyone towards the same goal.
Yeah, cool, amazing. Now, whenever I meet people who are doing something so remarkable like you, there's one question I always like to ask at the very beginning, which is, what kind of education did you have as a child? And when you look back on it now, you're this, a global voice when it comes to the future of education and what we can do with our children today. when you look back on your educational journey, how does it look?
Yeah, actually, I think that's such an interesting question, and I feel like you don't really reflect on that in life, especially as you are, into your career and doing all that. But I think that it's a really valuable question to ask, and it's interesting because I was born in Australia, but I actually did my primary school in Dubai. And the thing that when I reflect on primary school in Dubai, I do feel that the curriculum was really rich in not just the curriculum itself in different areas, but language development. We had a lot of like global studies, and we were really taught a lot more broadly about the world around us. And it wasn't just about the culture or the country that we were in. So I think that that exposure to different languages and culture from such an early age had an influence. And then as I came into high school here, I was sent to quite a strict Catholic school, which, I think the only highlight from that type of education was actually the extracurricular. So we had something called the Army Cadets and the Air Force Cadets. So we could actually enlist in the Army Cadets underage. It's almost like like the Girl Guides, but we'd wear the uniform. There was, all the camps that we used to do, and we used to go out in the middle of, in the bush and have our little compass and have to take responsibility for a platoon of people. And I think that in my schooling was one of the best things that I did, because you're going back to real life lessons. You're learning about, doing a trek for 7 days, carrying your own food, carrying everything, and trying to navigate a team of people as a teenager. So I think, that's something that really is rich in learning, aside from academic, which is what a lot of people or schooling focuses on.
Yeah, right. Because actually, what we do is we try to have this real world learning. We have it as an add-on, don't we? You're like, oh,
Yeah.
it's time for inquiry now. Thursday afternoon between 2 and 3, then you're allowed to do something real life. But I think that, and what you're saying is, the more that we can have that as part of our pedagogy as just something that's underlying, that's probably really important. So going back to, this journey of education, you're obviously not going to remember your preschool journey, but, how old should children be when they start school? And why is that that early? Lots of people in England don't go to school till they're 5, for example. They say, no school till 5. And then here in Australia, we go to Montessori school, and people are already enrolling their children before they're even born. Or even, there was, can I enroll my kids? Well, you haven't had a child yet. No, but I want to get them in the wait list. How soon should we be thinking about education?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. But I also wanted to say that education starts from birth. We know scientifically that the mind is developing at, an immense rate, especially in the early years. A child's brain develops by 80% in the first 3 years, and then that jumps to 90% in the first 5 years. So you can imagine the early years of life is when a child is learning all of those functions that they're going to use for the rest of their life. We're talking about, the basic, care of self and toileting and eating and making decisions and walking and all of these things, skills that are developed in the first few years. These are things that are going to be used for life. So when we think about preschool, I know a lot of people start to think about, the academic, the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3. But I think we really need to change that thinking and think about life skills, because that's actually essentially what is the foundation of education or learning. It's the social emotional. Does that child feel connected? Do they feel confident in themselves? Do they have self-belief? Do they have that intrinsic motivation to want to learn? It's about cultivating that want to learn. It's not about teaching them something. So I think when we think about, okay, preschool, what is the definition of that? With Montessori, we do start parent toddler classes and parent baby classes, but it's really about involving the parents in that learning and having these skills that they can then take back home and implement or have in the home environment as well. And it's really promoting that social emotional skill set. It's, the daily skills on dressing and, taking their shoes off, and such small learnings that taking place is that sensory tactile that babies and toddlers and children are looking for. So I think we underestimate what learning is taking place in the everyday, and we shouldn't really label it as preschool, because there's a huge difference in somebody turning 3 and parents saying, oh, well, I need to send them to preschool so that they learn, which really what they're referring to is the academic side of things. They need to do their ABC and 1 2 3 before they start school, because we see this massive pressure that's come not only from government organizations, but the push down from schools that are saying, these children need to come to school and they need to know X, Y, Z. Whereas I think that we need to really focus on the fundamentals of what learning is and what preschool education should look like, which is really going back to the basics of, the parents are children's first and foremost teachers in life, and having a foundation that will allow children to feel confident, have that self-belief, and feel connected to their space, that then sets up the foundation for all of the other learning. If a child doesn't feel connected, confident, and feel like they belong to a space, or that they're respected and can be contributing members, then none of the other learning will come on. It won't sink in, because that child doesn't have that foundational stones to really thrive. So I think we need to really look at that before we say, okay, well, a child needs to go to preschool at this age. And what kind of environment does that look like? So with the Montessori space, it's a very supportive space, and it comes in stages. So we've got the 2-hour or 1.5 hour for the babies and parents. We've got the 2-hour program for the toddlers. And then that moves to the work cycles for the 3 to 6 years olds, which is the 3-hour work cycles, 2 of those a day, which is a 6-hour day. So I think when people ask me that question, Sylvia, when should children start preschool? Firstly, it's dependent of the child. Where are they at? What are the needs of that family and the environment that they're in? Because some families do need that extra support where they need to place their child in care, if they're working, if they're 2-parent working homes and things like that. So you need to look at that as well, and also know that the biggest learning environment for a child is in the home. And so what does that look like when you think about education? Well, guess what? You're all doing it already without even knowing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Actually, like children spend so much time at home that they're such astute little learners. They watch everything and they mimic. I read an amazing quote: "What you are, they will become." Like
Yes.
there is no question about that. They're just watching like a hawk. And I guess what you're saying is you're almost saying it's about time that we started to rethink what success looks like, because
Yeah.
for many, many years, maybe 200, 300 years, we thought, well, if my child can do his ABCs and if he knows his phonemes and he can count to 10, and you
Yeah.
often hear parents saying that, like, oh, by the way, he's a little Tom is a genius, he can count to 10, he's only 3 years old. But what you're saying is, in actual fact, is your child confident? Are they resilient? Do they know how to share? Do they know how to be independent? I want to ask you a specific question, which I didn't put to you earlier, so I'm going to throw you on the spot here. How does the Montessori in the early years, how does it develop confidence? Like, how do you, because you can't teach confidence. You can't say, today we're going to learn how to be confident, everybody. Now you're all confident. Well done, grade A's. How does it work? If you're between the 0 to 7 bracket, how does a child learn how to be confident by being able to be independent within a Montessori environment?
Yeah. So exactly that. You can teach confidence, but it's in a way that's really inbuilt in the environment. So when a child is given the opportunity to be independent and to do things for themselves, that's how they start learning confidence, and it becomes self-confidence, right? So I'll give you an example. I had a child that walked in with a really heavy bag, and she was dragging along the floor. I can't, it's too heavy. I can't. And I'm just looking at her and I thought, you can do it. I believe in you. And I said, try two hands. So I gave her the tools. So in that example, I gave her the tools or the suggestion on maybe what she could do so she could be successful. So she picked it up and she really struggling, and she eventually put it in the cubby. The bag was bigger than herself. And she looked at me and she did this and she goes, I'm strong. Now, I didn't label that child as being strong, right? They developed that confidence because they found something difficult. I encouraged the child by giving them some affirmations and giving them the tools on, or the suggestion on what they could do to actually be successful. And she was successful in that. And then she reflected that she was strong, which shows you that internal motivation. It's not, I'm not telling her that she's strong. She actually had that inner voice, which is such a huge difference when we label children with a certain characteristic, or if it actually comes from within them. So I think it's really important to have the opportunity to build that, to be independent, the opportunity to encourage them to do things by themselves. And also when they find things difficult, to know how to encourage them in a way that doesn't put them down for finding it difficult. Because sometimes we brush children off, or we just say, oh, it's okay, you can do it, you've done it before. Even if you know that a child can be successful in doing something, in that moment they're feeling a certain way. So it's really important not to dismiss that, because all you're doing then is putting a child down for feeling a certain way. Now, it's really important to allow them to feel that, and then and give them the guidance on what they can do, and encourage them in a way so that they can keep going and trying, and then be confident, and that's how you really build that skill set. So giving them the opportunities, setting the environment up, and then encouraging in a way that doesn't just blanketly say, good job, or, because I could have easily turned to her and said, oh, good girl, you did it. But good girl is really just giving her that perspective or that subjective opinion on what I thought she did, right? It's not actually building her self-belief or self-confidence. So it's really important when we praise children. I just wanted to slot this in here, Gavin, if I can.
No, go for it.
That we don't just do those blanket evaluative praise, which is the good job, good girl, because all that's doing is telling a child that I think you've done a good job. And that's actually then going to set up this almost this boundary. Like the child is then going to be a bit insecure the next time when they don't hear it, and they think, oh, am I good enough this time? Did I do a good job? And they're looking to, they're looking to the adult constantly for that feedback. So it's really important that we avoid evaluating children, and we actually give them some constructive, feedback, like, you did it, or, you look so proud of yourself, or, and then the child will then build their internal motivation and that confidence. So it's important the way we communicate with them as well.
It's almost like inspiring self-reflection upon something you've just done. I mean, we often wait until we're in university and the lecturer says, okay, we're going to start looking at some self-reflection and think about what we're doing. But what you're saying is our children can do it when they're very, very young. It just takes us to be able to step back. And, listening to you talk there, I obviously have worked in schools a long time too. You need this certain level of patience where you are able to just not intervene and let it play out in front of you. Because I've been guilty of this myself. When I was a teacher, two children were talking in my class, I'd separate them. I'd say, you're talking, separate. But what I should have done is said, you're talking, continue to talk, and then we'll evaluate later if you know anything about the lesson we've just had. And say, I don't know anything. Well, how do you feel? Well, I don't feel great about that. What are you going to do about it? Well, I'm not going to sit with Tommy next time because I talk all the time. That's a great idea, and let the child decide.
Yeah.
But, and I've worked around parents a long time, and I'm sure you have too. And this is no criticism of parents, because parents are not teachers. And so it's something you train to do, especially if you're a Montessori teacher, you do special training around this whole observation reflection. And in my experience, the two biggest faux pas that I've seen parents do, or mistakes, is number one, answering a question for a child. So I've stood at the door and said, hi, Tommy, how was your holidays? And mum says, oh, we had a great holiday, didn't you, Tommy? You went to the beach. And Tommy's like, yeah. I was just about to say that, if you'd let me speak. But, that suddenly the child doesn't feel like they're heard. Or the second one is, a child's attempting to do something like maybe put the pink tower up, and it's taking quite a long time, or they've got one the wrong way around, and the parent just quickly fixes it and says, "Oh, well done, you've succeeded, great job, little Tommy." And I think we've got to step away from that. But in your experience, what are some of the biggest mistakes that parents make? And this is no criticism of parents. This is about us all moving together collectively. You see parents come to your school all the time. What kind of mistakes can we avoid if we're taking our children to school for the first time and maybe for the 100th time?
Yeah, I really so first I wanted to say, if there are parents listening out there, I don't particularly feel like they're mistakes, because parents really care for their children. They want the best for them. They want it to be the best experience. You know, sometimes they might feel a bit of fear or anxiety. You know, they might not know the environment very well. So I feel like they're not so much mistakes as much as they are fears sometimes, or you know, or actions that happen because they feel like they genuinely are doing the best thing for their child. So I think that one of the things I've seen with parents, if they feel a little bit anxious about or nervous dropping their child into a preschool for the first time, and they don't feel confident in the educators or the space, sometimes separation can be really hard for some children. So the more that you've prepared not only the child but the parents for that transition, the more successful it's going to be. Because when a child sees that a parent is worried, anxious, nervous, and they have that energy about them, the child is then going to feel the same way. So, you know, when you have the, "Oh, I'm not sure about letting go," and, you know, the last hug and the last hug, you know, the 10th last hug, and, "Oh, I'll just stay for another, you know, 10 minutes," and it's this prolonged separation, it really isn't allowing the child to see that you trust the educators, you trust the space, you know, they are going to be in good hands. So I feel like you've got to make sure that you prepare both the child and the parent for that transition. It is really hard. It's the first time that they're putting their child in an environment outside of their family, outside of people that they know. It could be the first ever. You know, I've had some families that have never left their child with anybody. So it's really about making them feel comfortable, you know, having those visits beforehand, making sure that they observe and have the questions prepared, so that they feel really confident and comfortable in the space and the educators. So trusting the space and the educators, that's a big one. You know, making sure that it's a quick separation. And if you do have concerns, you know, that your child is upset, you know, allow the team to contact you, you know. And I always tell educators, you know, let the parents know, you know, how they're going after 10-15 minutes once they've settled. You know, sometimes the child will be upset, and then as soon as their parent goes around the corner, they're ready to come in and they're happy. And yeah, so I think it's just really about that trust and the reciprocal relationship that you have with the team and the teachers and the environment, knowing that they're going to, you know, give that confidence not only to you but to your child as well. Another thing that I feel that parents maybe focus on too much, again, goes back to that academic. You know, a lot of parents ask me, you know, so is my child going to learn, you know, like their ABC and 1, 2, 3? And I feel like I need to really explain that the most important thing for school readiness, or for a child to move on to that school age, the kindergarten, is that social emotional. You know, if a child feels confident, if they feel, you know, if they feel like they can communicate to their peers about a problem or something that's bothering them, if they know how to regulate, you know, if they're feeling upset and frustrated, what kind of tools are we giving children to feel that they can cope with different emotions and different circumstances, and, you know, build that resilience? So I feel like those are the key things. And when I explain that to parents, then they think, "Oh yeah, okay, that makes sense." Because there's no point in me sitting down. Any child can memorize ABC 1, 2, 3, but do they actually know the concept of what it is? So allowing parents to understand how the learning takes place in a very sensory, tactile, you know, the Montessori environment has some beautiful resources that are that really allow children to understand the concept of what these things are. They touch the materials, they feel them, you know, and this is how learning is built. So I always tell the parents, my goal is to help your child learn how to learn rather than what to learn.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so that I think those are the two main things that I feel that parents come in with concerns, or those are the main questions that we get in that preschool transition. Hopefully that answered that question.
Yeah, no, in great depth. And I guess what I learned from Montessori was the routines were so important that we had our 3 hour work cycle, and it was 3 hours and it weren't interrupted, because I think what we find when things aren't going to plan or things are different, our children go, well, I wasn't expecting that. Like I'm a creature of routine. Our children like routine. They like to know what's coming up. And I've made this big mistake as a teacher for many years previous to my Montessori training, where I would redesign my classroom in the holidays. And then when the kids came in, it would be chaos. And I wonder why. And I realized later it's because they didn't feel safe in that environment, because it was all different. And what I should have done is rearranged it with them in the last week of term, so they were involved in the whole thing. How important are those routines in a Montessori preschool, in a Montessori pre-primary environment? And, how can we emulate them at home?
Yeah, absolutely. Routines are key. I mean, if anyone, working in the early childhood space, or even like scientifically, research has shown how children thrive so much when they have that order. And I think that this is what, Maria Montessori was talking about when she was talking about order and that prepared environment. And we keep the classroom the same for the whole term. We might bring in materials, because we follow children's interests. We might, bring in some additional resources if we feel that, a child specifically needs some extension or has an interest in a particular area. But what's really interesting is when the children, you see throughout the term, the movement of the child through the classroom. So because everything has stayed the same, they actually tend to explore newer areas of the classroom, or things that they might not have even picked up before. And you always see it within the last few weeks of the term. And you think, like just today, I stepped into the classroom, I thought, oh my gosh, look at what that child is working on. That's incredible. They haven't touched it all term, but they then found that moment, right towards the end, where they felt to go and, and do that. So I think the environment itself is really important, but also those morning routines. So when I was talking about that separation, children go through a morning rhythm. So they'll come in, they'll choose a cubby, so whichever one that they prefer, and then they'll take their bag off, sit down, take their shoes off, place them in their cubby, and then off they go into their work cycle. And I think that having those routines is essential for children to feel that stability. So when they feel like they belong and, they've got autonomy over their space, so they can come in, choose whichever place they want to put their things in, sit down, take their shoes off, and then they have the freedom to go and choose whether they want to, they might want to have a snack, or they might want to venture into the classroom, whatever it is. But having that sense of autonomy and choice and rhythm in their day, it just starts them off on the right foot. So if they came in and didn't have that order of process, it would just be like, okay, well, where do I start and what do I do? And then it's almost like this disorganization that then sets up the day. We as adults have our things that we do in the morning. I can tell you now, everybody that's listening out here has their specific rhythm of the morning. And if something goes slightly out of order in that morning routine, we all feel off. It's just a basic human, intrinsic thing that we all have and do. So I feel like that's a very important part of the Montessori classroom, but the daily rhythm. And then you say, how do we, how can we implement that in the home? Well, it's just like our own routines that we have, in the morning or during the day, and having that for children, especially if parents are working from home. There might be some that are working and, kind of multitasking between the children and doing those tasks. So I feel like it's really important to have some basic rhythm of the day, that children know what to expect. Because, Gavin, especially in the early years, we see a lot of those big emotions, a lot of those big moments that happen at home is because children haven't had enough time or warning for the next transition. So children operate, so we're talking 0 to 6 years, they operate on a much slower level than we do. So they need plenty of warning. They need understanding of what the day is going to look like, and then plenty of time to transition from one thing to another. So the biggest outbursts that we see and clash and tantrums and all of that is just because they're finding it difficult to adapt to the adult. So it's so important that we give children some grace and time to be able to then come to some sort of, median, so that we can have that balance between the child and the adult, especially in the home.
That's very wise words, but also very difficult, right? I mean, it's very difficult. Mom or dad's trying to get to the office, and little
Yeah.
Tommy wants to put his blue shoes on today, and the blue shoes are the only ones that he wants to wear, and he can only find one of them. It is very tricky, and I've seen it many times play out. But you're quite right that for the child, it's really important that we understand their perspective. I think perspective is a great deal of wisdom for us as teachers and adults. Like, imagine the world through the child's eyes. And I think, one of the most important phrases children say is, "It's not fair." And I was reading about this just this week. They actually mean, it's actually not fair. What's happening right now to me, I don't feel it to be fair. And therefore, you need to acknowledge that. What's just happened? You did it. Why can't I do it? I'm a human being just like you. So I guess, look, that leads me into another question, which is really important. We're leaving the early years. We're going into kindergarten. We're 6. What should our children be able to do? What should they know? What skills should they have? What values do we need to have? What are the important ones? And obviously we could be here all night just on this question, but I just want to get away from that whole conversation of, well, my child knows how to add these numbers, knows these graphemes, and is able to, do their ABCs backwards, so they're ready for kindy. We're going into school. We're going into big school, where you now have to start managing your time and handing in some work to your teacher for a certain deadline, for example, for want of a better word. So, what are those fundamentals that we need to give our children before they head into that big school arena?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the key things is independence. So children must be able to be independent. So beyond all of the academic stuff, independence is one of the key characteristics that we really need to instill in children, and that can be done from such a young age. When a child is able to be independent, they can take on those tasks that the teacher needs them to do and sit there and fulfill the task, without having to sit there and think, okay, well, what are the steps, or what do I need to do? They have the problem solving skills. So that's another thing, having the ability to problem solve, make decisions. A child has to be able to make decisions. And it could be simple decisions like, what t-shirt are they going to wear, this one or this one, but those simple decisions that seem really mundane in early childhood set up the decision making for bigger decisions when they need to occur. So those are some things. Adaptability, being able to adapt to, and I feel like adaptability comes from resilience, which also comes from building intrinsic motivation. What I mean by that is building a child's self-confidence. So like we were talking about, building their self-belief, self-esteem, self-confidence, all of those things will then lead to being able to be adaptable and feel confident no matter what environment they're in. A lot of parents ask me, Sylvia, and they don't have access to a Montessori primary school. So some kids move from my preschool to a mainstream education system. And they ask me beforehand, what happens to these children? Well, where they're going to go from this amazing Montessori space to mainstream. And I tell them, guess what? They are going to thrive because they have the skill set to adapt to any environment or whatever life throws at them, because they're independent, they're confident, they have the ability to make decisions. They have that motivation intrinsically. And so those are some key elements that I feel that are really important on top of the social emotional well-being. So making sure a child feels that they're supported, sense of belonging, and responsibility for their things. So I think those are the key characteristics.
Yeah, they're amazing. Obviously, one of the most beautiful things I learned about Montessori, and I saw it with my own eyes, that wowed me when I first came into the environment, was this kind of this multi-age classroom. And so
Yes.
you have this hierarchy that was already built. It was already set. And there was this kind of a river of empathy in the room, whereas if somebody was struggling or needed assistance and the teacher was busy because the teacher was working one-on-one with another child, then the children would just turn to an older child. And the older child would just automatically go, let
Yes.
me take you under my wing, let
Yes.
me help you, because it was part of the culture, it was part of the philosophy, it was something embedded in the room. And that brings me on to leadership. You know, we talk about education, preparing our children for tomorrow's world, and you know, the leaders of tomorrow lie dormant on the classrooms of today, and all these wonderful phrases.
Yeah.
Yeah. What does it look like in a Montessori environment between 0 and 7? How does leadership manifest itself, and how do you observe that?
Yeah, exactly that. And that's exactly what I was going to say in terms of a mixed age classroom. So we have, the older children who are the 5, 6s, almost ready for school. And then you've got the younger ones that might be 3.5 that are struggling with something. And you don't even need to ask. It's like as soon as these older children see, some of their younger ones struggling, they're more than willing to step in. And this is what leadership skills are, right? They identify the problem, and they find a solution, and then they go and they want to assist, and they want to find and they want to help. And I think that's such a key, and it's so beautiful when you see it in action, and you just think this is exactly why Montessori, because you see how children innately want to help, they want to lead. We have children that want to assist the teachers in doing a specific task, whether it's preparing all the bags at the end of the day and gathering everyone's belongings, or caring for the environment. So we have children that will see a mess on the floor and just clean it up because they believe that it's their space and they want to care for it. That's leadership, being able to kind of sit down and make decisions in the curriculum. So sometimes we always reflect and ask children, what is it that you feel like you'd like to do today? Is there some activities, or allowing them to make curriculum decisions is one of the best ways to give them a taste of what leadership looks like. And it's like, okay, well, and everyone comes up with an idea, and it's like, well, today is, John's turn to, for his idea, and then we can go through and really explore all of those things that the children want to do. So allowing them to be part of the decision making in curriculum is so important. And I think having projects where they can work on together, and coming up with ideas and noting them down and not dismissing them, and actually actioning them. So it's all well and good to say, we want to practice leadership and give children opportunities, but you've actually got to support them in fulfilling those things. And when they see the outcomes of their efforts and their, and their decisions and what they've done, it's just so beautiful to see that, that joy and that happiness and the fulfillment that comes from that. So yeah, absolutely. The mixed age classroom, and giving them curriculum decision opportunities to make in the day is really important, and allowing them to assist if they want to.
Yeah, so beautiful. And, we actually live in a world where we are all competing against each other, our schools, our countries, our children. It's dog eat dog, and it's I've come top of the class, and so everyone else is bottom, and I'm the leader, and yay, look at me, I'm top of the class. And that empathy is missing. And so what Montessori does actually, it's just part of the environment, and it's part of who we are. We care for each other. And I think what's even more important as well is that our parents and our teachers and everyone listening, is that our children are watching very carefully what we do and how we act. And when
Yes.
Barbara comes into the classroom, your co-teacher, and she's crying and she's like, I'm struggling. And then you say, hey, Barbara, why don't you come in and sit down and we'll have a cup of tea and have a chat. They're watching you like a hawk. And they say, oh, when someone's crying, that's what I do. That's
Yeah.
what I do. I acknowledge that, and I go and take care of that. So, the learning comes all the way back to the beginning, where the learning comes from us as the adults. And you said the extension of this classroom was the home, which is really important. But the environment in which we prepare for our students, we welcome them into this space. And Montessori classrooms are very, very beautiful. There's no question about it. They're all beautiful wood. There's plants. There's lots of light and all this wonderful stuff.
Yeah.
How important is that environment, and why do we prepare it? What's the point in preparing it so carefully for the children?
Yeah, so I want to take away, I want to take away all the beautiful resources and all that, because I know that a lot of people don't have access to that. So yes, if you do, that's such a bonus and it's great, but there's also so many resources that you can make yourself as well that have the same outcome, or, you know, DIY, but really it comes down to the principles. So when we talk about, you know, the essence of Montessori, what does that actually mean? You know, what does it look like to respect the child? What does it look like to see them as capable and confident? Also, the practical life aspect. So what is practical life? You know, practical life is allowing children opportunities to develop either, you know, a control of movement, care of self, care of the environment, and grace and courtesy. So all of these things, these four components, create practical life. So basically like life skills. And that's really a lot of the essence of where this learning takes place. And I feel like that can be done in any environment. It is also important for the environment to be aesthetically beautiful. So everything in order, everything has its place. You know, you can create that ambiance and that environment no matter where you are. So even if you're in the home, making sure that it's decluttered, you know, there's only a few things out. It doesn't have to be a massive bucket of toys, because we want children to be successful, not only in using those things, but packing away as well and caring for their environment. So the importance of the prepared environment is a big one. But I also feel like you can work with any environment. So I want people listening to know that regardless if you have access to, you know, beautiful Montessori materials, a lot of the essence of Montessori can be done in any environment. And it can also be done when applying practical life activities and skills. So things like, you know, caring for the environment. So window washing, table scrubbing, watering the plants, you know, care of self, dressing, you know, packing things away. And then we've got grace and courtesy. So modeling, like you said, modeling those grace and courtesy things like how to, you know, push a chair in politely, how to walk past someone, how to say please and thank you. All of that comes from modeling. You know, can I please have a turn? The adult really stepping in for that. And control of movement. So having all of those activities that will help in that. So I feel that, yeah, when it comes to the environment, it is really important to have a prepared space, but the principles of Montessori can be applied anywhere. And actually, I wanted to gift everyone listening, if everyone out there loves free gifts, it's a principles poster. So I actually put together this poster, one for the home and one for the classroom. If everyone out there are educators, I'd love to gift one for your classroom. So it's basically this list, and I won't go through them because I'm mindful of time, but it's basically the principles of Montessori. And this just kind of allows us to step back and really reflect on what does that environment look like. So, you know, we trust the child being capable and confident. We respect that they're an equal and valued member of our community. We encourage their independence. So things like that will really allow people to understand, well, what is the essence of this environment? You know, what am I thinking? What do I need to do? How, you know, what values underpin this space?
That's amazing, and you're quite right. You know, the materials are expensive, but they're only a part of this whole thing that we call the Montessori philosophy. You're quite right, and there's more to it than just those materials. But that order, the routine, and the prepared environment, and alongside the values, you know, educates the whole child. Now, you've almost answered it, but I want to ask you anyway. Part of the question is that, you know, people love practical life. They really do. And I listened to a podcast just a few days ago, a Montessori podcast, and the person talking said that work for an adult is play for the child, which is true. You know, and I remember when my mum was vacuuming, I always wanted to vacuum too, but there was only one vacuum. And when I was allowed to vacuum, I felt this honor of like, wow, I'm allowed to vacuum now. But you know, now I hate vacuuming. So, but when you're a child and you're young, you don't. You know, you love all those things. Why are those things so important? Why is it important that we actually let our children play a part in those things? And how come, you know, how come any mom or dad today or teacher let that roll out in their classroom or home tomorrow?
Yeah. Okay, so the first part of that question was, ask me again, Gavin, what was the first part of your question?
You know, practical life. How important is practical life?
Yeah. So the biggest thing when it comes to practical life is that it allows children to feel like they belong. So these little mundane activities that we see that we don't think is anything, like washing the dishes or putting the laundry in, or preparing food, for example. These are things that children aren't allowed to do in mainstream, but obviously Montessori promotes that. And the reason why is that it's giving children a message. It's giving children a message that I respect you, I see you as capable and contributing to our community. Because a lot of the time adults don't think children can do it, or it's too difficult, or it's, oh, it's just going to create more of a mess and I can't handle that. So the biggest thing that stops parents and educators in the early childhood space is that they can't deal with the mess. And I completely understand that, especially in the home when you've got 50 things happening around you and your child, your toddler is toddling along with a massive jug of water, and it's just going to spill everywhere, and you're going to have more anxiety that they're going to slip and hit themselves, and it's just going to be chaotic. So my biggest advice with people who want to implement practical life: start slow. Start to teach one skill at a time and know where your child is at developmentally so that they can be successful with the activity. There's no point giving a toddler a massive jug full of water because they're just going to spill it everywhere. They don't have the skill set at that time to be able to manage that tool. So having a child-sized tool, so a smaller jug, and being full is only, about a third of the way, because then they have less chance that they're going to spill it. So they'll have more success with it. And the more success they have with that activity, the more confidence it builds in themselves. And the more that they feel like, hey, oh, look, I did it. I did it by myself. And that's what builds their confidence. So when you ask me, what does practical life do? It absolutely builds children's confidence in themselves. You see 18-month-olds and 2-year-olds, walking around carrying a little plate, setting the table, making a crusket. And you just think, oh my gosh, wow. Like, and parents that come in that might have an older child think, wow, my child has never had the opportunity to do that, to spread their own, crusket, or, or cut a banana, whatever it is. And we really undervalue how important these skills or opportunities are. So I feel like if you are starting off with practical life, make it really simple. Start off with a bowl and a spoon that a child can then stir something with, if it's in the kitchen and you're worried about them hurting themselves or anything. So with parents, they have to self-reflect and understand, what is it that's stopping me? Do I have anxiety about something? Am I worried that they're gonna, hurt themselves? Okay, well, what can I do about that? Can I have a child-safe knife? Can I have a smaller jug so that, the child can manage it more? Can I start off with stainless steel instead of giving them glass, because that makes me feel more comfortable? There's no point in giving a child a jug and not believing in them that they can do it, because guess what? The child will drop the glass because they feel what you're thinking, not what you're doing or saying. So if you say, oh yeah, you can do it, and you're thinking, oh my God, they're going to drop it, guess what? They're going to drop it. So, it's really important that you believe in the child and see them as being capable. And that's hard to do sometimes because we think, oh, but just give it a go. We've got so many, there are so many resources out there. There are so many places that you can go to find out how you can start off with things like practical life and what you can do and how you can implement it at home. It's one of the easiest things, putting a little stool next to the front door that a child can sit on so that they can do their shoes. A lot of the time, the child's just hanging on to the parent or whoever's there with one leg, up in the air and trying to get the shoe on. And it's just, it's not the right opportunity. It's not going to allow the child to feel like they can do it. But just putting a one little stool right there that they can sit on and then attempt to put their shoe on, that's just small things that we can do to really encourage that.
Amazing. And let me just, for anyone listening, tell you what that looks like when that's implemented in preschool. When you go into primary school and you're in a Montessori school or in any school, in the school I was running, children say, oh, Gavin, we'd like to go on an excursion to the zoo. Can we use the telephone? You say, well, why would you like to use the telephone? It's, well, I've made the risk assessment. I want to book the bus now. I've made the letter to go home to the parents, and we've organized our own excursion. Everything's already done. They even made the risk assessment, for the excursion. And in many aspects of school life, we don't get, our children don't get a chance to actually experience that or practice those things. But they set our children up for success in the future. There's no question about it, because these executive functions that we're talking about, they're very important as we go into adulthood. Okay, now I'll ask the last question in a second that I have for you that I've pre-prepared. But before I do that, if there's anybody who's listening to this and they wish to ask a question in the last kind of 5 or 8 minutes of this presentation, now's your chance to throw it into the chat while Sylvia answers this final question from me. So Sylvia,
yes,
there are many educational facilities around the world, 0 to 7. There's, I don't know, I read yesterday, I think there's 200 million preschools
wow.
on the planet. Now, obviously, you haven't visited all of them. That would be too many. But what are the 5 things you think that all preschools should have, either physical or material or emotional or sensorial? What are your top 5?
Oh, that's really hard, Gavin. I can't, like, there are so many things, but we'll try and summarize something. So I guess one of the main things, we were just talking about practical life opportunities. So obviously having the practical life. So if there's anything that preschools can implement that is so easy to do, involve children in, is the practical life aspect. So allowing things that they can do to care for their environment, to be part of the, the meal prep and all of that kind of stuff. That's really important. If they can have mixed age classrooms, 100%. We're talking about leadership and, building that confidence and that resilience and the opportunity for children to really interact and show those skills and empathy. That's a huge one that I would totally encourage for preschools. The next one that I wanted to mention was something that I see that's lacking. And it comes specifically when we talk about the way educators are communicating to children. So I find a lot of the time, there's the yelling and the, everyone get in line. And even if it is a Montessori space, we were never really taught how to guide children's behavior, if we're a bit challenged or we're not too sure how to respond to something. So having the skill set on how to communicate is key. And I feel like if anyone, that's, something I'm very passionate about, how to get kids to listen, or how to really upskill educators on how they can say things and how they can communicate to engage that cooperation and really support children that need it the most. Because the biggest stress and the number one cause, research tells us the number one cause for teachers leaving the early childhood sector is due to stress. And the stress that is caused from not being able to be supported in the classroom when it comes to, communication and guiding children. So I feel like that's really, really essential. And it's something that is really lacking in all of our training. Understanding the principles and the values of that space. So really everyone being in line with the values and the philosophy is so key, because if there's no consistency, then there's no consistency for the children. So they really need to feel that from everybody in the space. So coming back to that prepared environment, that involves the prepared adult, the prepared space, and really, having that reflection of an educator as a team and seeing, okay, what is it? Why are we here? What's our purpose? So reflection on that. And then allowing children to be part of the decision making. So I would really urge people out there that are in preschools or, to just sit down with your preschool kids and let them know, just say, this is your chance today. What is it that you feel like doing? Does anyone have any ideas? And then actioning that. I think those would be my top 5 suggestions.
Wow, amazing. Yes, so cool. And, I think that these are especially, they're very common. One of the ones you mentioned there, which resonated with me, was the one around how to communicate with children. I've worked in schools previously where shouting at children was just the thing. And it's just, if you're not listening, I will shout. And, I remember thinking to myself, well, if you're going to shout and then tell the children not to shout, well, they're not going to understand that, because they copy, you are the role model, and they're copying you. It's kind of, it's a yin, you're leaving the child caught between a rock and a hard place there. You're not modeling the behavior you wish to view. Now, a lot of people are asking for this presentation to record it, to share with their community, which is cool. So I will do that afterwards. And also I will share with everybody else the link to your wonderful principles and values for Montessori pedagogy. if we want to know more about you and we want to know more about Guide and Grow, we want to be involved in your online community, we want our parents to understand what they can do at home and access all of your resources, where do we go? What do we do? Where do we click? How do we find a wonderful Sylvia online?
Yeah, so if you just jump on to www.guideandgrow.com, we'll just pop it in the chat for you guys. There are so that you just subscribe and you'll receive all our newsletters. At the moment, we've got 12 days of Giftmas, which is a free resource every single day for parents and educators at home. So that's all yours. I think we're up to day 5, but don't worry, at the end of day 12, we'll send everyone all the resources. So it's all free. It's on our website. We've got our social media, so Guide and Grow just at Guide and Grow. We've got our YouTube channel, Guide and Grow TV. So it's all there. One-stop shop. You can just go to the website and subscribe to guideandgrow.com.
Amazing. Now, I've got to ask you one personal question here. So now, you know, it's 2022. What do you expect to be doing in 10 years? Where will you be? What will be happening? What's your dream if you had to think big? Where would Guide and Grow and yourself be? And you're not allowed to say the Maldives.
Oh, no, Gavin. Put me on the spot. Okay, so I'll have to think about that one. I think I feel like I'm so much like in the present, kind of going day by day, that I haven't thought that far ahead. But if my ultimate goal would really be to set up these type of preschools and education in countries that don't have access to it. So that's one of my biggest goals, was to really be successful in Guide and Grow so that we can spread that message across and really support educators where they need it the most. So setting up that institution that can actually then feed off and then, you know, multiply that into places for children specifically that don't have access to it. So
amazing.
That's the goal.
Well, the reason I asked that question is there's lots of people from all over the world in this meeting. And, you know, if there is anybody out there, and my good old friend Mona Naz is here from Dubai today, and she's very, very active in this space. If there are people out there who want to work alongside you or give you a hand or point you in the right direction of where that might occur, then Sylvia is accessible. She's very approachable. I had a coffee with her the other week and it was delightful. Thank you, Sylvia. Look, it's been an honor to have you here. Your words of wisdom are, you know, something we don't get very often for free in this world. So it's very kind that you've offered to stay behind. I know it's late where you are today. So we appreciate you. We appreciate your time. And look, we hope you have a wonderful break. You deserve it. And we look forward to seeing you in the new year. For anybody else listening to this, it will be recorded and it will be up on our website on upschool.co for the rest of the year and the foreseeable future. Sylvia, thank you so much for being here. It's been so nice to have you.
Thank you, Gavin. Thank you so much for everyone out there that's listening, taking your time out to be here this evening, this morning, wherever you're listening to from around the world. I've just seen all your comments as well. I really appreciate it. And I am passing through Dubai as well. And yeah, my heart is in there because I grew up there as well. So it's a very close to home for me. So yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much. Everyone's very appreciative and we appreciate your time. Go home, have a wonderful evening and have a wonderful break.
Bye, Gavin. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thank you for coming. See you soon.